This is Matthew McConaughey.
Natalie Portman.
James Patterson.
Michael Ian Black.
And you are listening to
Five Questions
with Dan Schawbel.
Steve, welcome to Five Questions.
Good to be here. Thank you very much.
What originally piqued your interest in politics and what has kept you interested over multiple decades?
Well, the fact is that politics is about how people organize themselves, what kind of society you create, what kind of environment you enable people to work in, hopefully thrive in. And then when you look at the human condition, why have things gone well in the past? Why have things gone badly in the past? It's history. People are always interesting. People is politics. And so it's an environment. It's not be all end all as the totalitarians would have it. But hopefully you have the kind of political system that brings out the best in the character of a nation.
Well said. And it impacts you whether you like it or not, right? It's
yes,
even if you don't think politics is impacting your life, it is in more ways than you can even think of.
That's right. And my grandfather was interested in it because of how it impacted the environment for commerce. My father had been involved in politics for a while back in the 1950s and the New Jersey politics. And so, yes, it's always been an interest. And you're right. It impacts us. Even if you don't like it, you better be aware of it because it does have an impact. And if you ignore it, you're not going to like the results.
And speaking of your family, what did you learn from your father and grandfather on how to run a publishing company, and what lessons would you pass down to your children?
My grandfather loved the word stick-to-itiveness. The key thing is to find something that you have a knack for, that you like. My grandfather always knew from an early age that he wanted to be a business reporter. He was one of 10 children, 6 of 10 children in Scotland. But he got that ambition and he went around parts of the world, eventually came to the United States in the early 1900s and became a successful business reporter. Let me just quickly relate one story. When he came to New York, he couldn't find a job. So he went to an editor one day and said, I'll offer you my services for free. If I show my worth, I trust you'll hire me. Well, he was taking a risk. That's entrepreneurship. He knew if he just knocked on doors, he was going nowhere. So he took that risk. Then he got the job, but he was so full of energy and ambition that he went to another editor using a different name and got hired there. And probably the highlight of his life was when the two editors got into an argument as to who had the best business reporter. It was my grandfather in both cases. And my father, we learned from him. There's a lot of scut work involved in anything you do. We know that preparing for athletic events, but it's true when you're working on a project or in the workplace. You have to be willing to do the unglamorous things to get a good result. And the key thing is working with people. The key thing is recognizing that you can't do it all yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, what your father did is exactly what I did. I wrote a lot of articles in the beginning for free speeches, free research reports, back even before that, free internships like at, Reebok and other companies that had helped elevate my whole career, because it's kind of like a low cost, low risk to the employer to be able to take that on. And then if you do a really good job, you kind of justify the money at that point. So I'm like very into that career strategy. And I think a lot of people still overlook it because they think that their work is valuable when if their work was valuable, they'd already be getting paid for it. So I think sometimes you have to kind of do something and make those type of sacrifices to get yourself in the door. And I think that's one of the better strategies because I've lived it.
Good. It's obviously working. But you have to always ask yourself, you have to put yourself in the shoes of another person. Why would they want what you are offering? Why would they be interested in what you are offering? So seeing that other perspective, you can have a better chance of achieving moving forward by realizing it's not just you're working with others.
Exactly. Creating a mutual relationship is really key, and empathizing with their needs, because if you can solve their problems, business is about solving problems, then you can better justify getting more money and advancing your career. And why did you focus on inflation for your new book? And what do most people not understand about how it impacts their work lives?
Well, inflation was clear about a year ago when we started on this with my co-authors, that this was going to be a looming problem. And one of the things we try to explain in this book, it's a very reader friendly, very straightforward. We kept the jargon out, is there are two kinds of inflation. One is non-monetary, which is what happens, say, when you have a drought or a war that disrupts things, or the COVID lockdowns, which just vastly disrupted supply chains, leading to dislocations and price increases. Those things, if you leave them alone, will eventually work their way out. The other kind of inflation, which is the most dangerous kind, is the monetary kind, where you lower the value of money, which affects prices. And as Keynes said, not one in a million understand what is going on. Why are the prices going up? Why do activities not being rewarding, where speculation seems to be more of a way to get ahead than turning out new products and services? So it's not just economic, it's corrosive of social trust. So we wanted to get a book out there that explained what the inflations are, showed how governments in the past have made a mess in fighting it, what the Biden administration is doing now, scapegoating. I mean, we point out in Roman times, they blamed Christians. In medieval times, they blamed witches. In the early 20s in Germany, they blamed Jewish bankers and merchants. Nixon, in the early 70s, blamed the Arabs. They're always blaming somebody else. But it's government undermining the integrity of the money that is the problem.
And as a member of the labor force and just a member of the country, just understanding the concept of inflation, understanding how it impacts your life is kind of this first step into being able to do something about it, and being able to kind of manage your finances and kind of play in a role in the economy so that you don't get as hurt as other people might if they don't have that education.
Yes,
financial literacy is very important.
And it's important so you get a grasp of what is actually happening, instead of feeling events are just battering you from all sides and you don't understand what's hitting you. And we point out some of the things you can do in an inflationary environment in terms of investing. Warning, one that requires real work. There's no simple solution. But also, if inflation gets conquered, which eventually it does, eventually they deal with it, investments that work good in an inflationary environment may not work well at all in a non-inflationary environment. We saw that in the 1980s. Oil was a big deal in the 70s, and it crashed in the 80s. You had depressions in Texas. Farm prices crashed. So there's no one strategy where you can just sit back and twiddle your thumbs. It requires work.
And taking a step back, looking at the entire economy, what are you most optimistic about and pessimistic about?
In terms of the economy, I'm optimistic that the American economy, the very fact that it's a free economy, can adjust to mistakes, can adjust to changing environments, and therefore can self-correct in a way that other economies cannot, can do it faster. And what I worry about, though, is that policymakers continue creating an environment where that kind of process is hindered. We saw that in the late 1970s. People had the feeling maybe we're going to turn this thing around. It didn't happen with Jimmy Carter, unfortunately. It did happen with Ronald Reagan. So the key thing is to, what I worry about is that we're pursuing things that stand in the way of it instead of getting out of the way. And that's why I am optimistic, but I just wish it could happen sooner.
Well, I'm glad there's hope.
There's always hope. You give people the right environment. Don't have them focus on a lot of stuff that isn't productive, like this crazy tax code we have. And it's amazing the creativity people from the most unlikely backgrounds can come up and do great things. You never see it coming. That's what is the miracle of it.
Definitely. And what's your best piece of career advice?
Find out what you have a knack for and be prepared for failure and setbacks. It's painful, but so you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. As my father liked to say, if you think you've arrived, you're ready to be shown the door. So find out what you have a knack for, be prepared to do what my grandfather called stick-to-itiveness, and know you're going to get battered about sometimes along the way. That's life, but you learn. Steve Jobs, remember, was fired from his own company before the age of 30. and learn painfully how to become an effective CEO. You can have the same kind of career path when you get a setback, move ahead.
Yeah, setbacks create opportunities, and they create an education for you, because you probably haven't done what you're doing now before, and so you have to kind of navigate through it. And through that navigation, you learn maybe more about yourself, and maybe you want to switch professions or go back to school or start a business. So I think the setbacks can kind of, if you take some self-reflection, point you in the right direction.
That's right. And also realize, again, you're not alone in this world. You're not a universe. As Lincoln said, events have controlled me more than I've controlled events. It's the nature of the world.
I love that. That's great advice. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you. And thank you for pointing out the book Inflation. It's timely, and we need it in this crazy environment.